Welcome to World of Writecraft. This is the second part of the final edit of Dark Choices. Christopher walked out of the gym. He was tired and a little exhausted from dancing all night. He had a good time, met some new people, and especially enjoyed his time with Jennifer. She was a wonderful dancer, and he looked forward to seeing her again. He had just waved to his friends and started home when he caught something out of the corner of his eye. Turning to look, he saw the man Draven go behind the gym. Christopher considered not following him, but his curiosity got the better of him and he followed. Also going behind the gym. I don't need to say also going behind the gym. That is redundant, so I will get rid of that. He moved quickly to catch up to him, but despite hurrying, when he got behind the gym, Draven was nowhere to be seen. Then all of a sudden, he felt a chill come over his body and heard Draven's voice behind him. How did he do that? Hello, Christopher. It's a pleasure to see you again. You had fun tonight, I hope? Christopher nearly jumped, but managed to keep calm and turned around, facing Draven. I did have fun, thank you. Are you following me? Let's see. I kinda want to revisit that last sentence. Christopher nearly jumped, but managed to keep calm and turned around, facing Draven. I'm going to say Christopher was startled and nearly jumped, but managed. It still sounds a little weird. Nearly jumped. I'm having problems with that two words. Christopher was startled. I don't even have the nearly jump. I'm just going to say he was startled. I know you're supposed to show, not tell, but nearly jump sounds weird. Christopher was startled, but managed to keep calm and turned around, facing Draven. I did have fun, thank you. Are you following me? Draven nodded. You caught me. I have been following you ever since you beat up that man in the alleyway. Christopher thought back to that day. He didn't know he knew this, but he was certain that the feeling he felt the other day, leaving the alleyway, he didn't say alleyway, leaving the alley was his body's way of telling him that Draven had been there. It was the same feeling he felt when Draven had just appeared behind him. He knew now that Draven was the person who killed Frank that night. It was you killed Frank. Draven grinned, showing his teeth. Christopher noticed he had bigger than average incisors. Yes, I killed that man. I'd been following him for a while that night. I was the hunter and he my prey. It fed on him and dropped him back down into the alleyway. I have been hunting through the ages, feeding, killing as I please. And I want you to join me. Christopher nodded. Sorry. Christopher stood there with his mouth open. He was in shock. This man, Draven, was a murderer and you wanted him to join him? Join him in what? Some sort of hunting sport? No, he said he'd been doing this for ages. How old was he? What was he? He looked at Draven again. He was no longer smiling, but he thought back to those teeth, those incisors. He said he had been feeding. No, it couldn't be. Is he a vampire? Christopher didn't want to believe it, but he felt in his soul, however unlikely, that vampires were real, and that he was now face to face with one. What's it want me to change it to? That's done. I'm going to ignore that. He wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't respond. He was stuck there, unable to move. No longer able to hide his feelings, he spoke in a shaky voice. What do you want from me? I want you to join me, to become a vampire, and let me teach you all I know. You have a fighting spirit. I can nurture it and bring out the best in you. Make me a vampire? Immortality. But at what cost? To live a life of bloodshed? Christopher could feel some sort of weight pressing down on his body. He felt heavy. I'm not going to say some sort of weight. I'm going to say Christopher could feel a weight pressing down on his body. He felt heavy. His mind was fuzzy. It was hard to think, but he managed to shake his head ever so slightly. No, thank you. Draven laughed ever so slightly. Oh, I used ever so slightly within 2 sentences. That's no good. Let's see. Chuckled. Yeah, he chuckled. No, chuckled sounds weird. Draven chuckled. No. See, the times I'm getting into the editing, so I have to fix this so I can't just pass it up. So I have to figure out how I want to do it. Oh, I'm going to change the sentence before that. Manage to slightly shake his head. No, no thank you. Alright, so Draven laughed so slightly. Ever so slightly. Still doesn't sound right. Let's see. I'm just going to start over the last paragraph. Make me a vampire? Immortality, but at what cost? To live a life of bloodshed? Christopher could feel a weight pressing down on his body. He felt heavy. His mind was fuzzy. It was hard to think, but he managed to slightly shake his head. No, no thank you. Draven laughed ever so slightly. You think you have a choice? Normally, you wouldn't. However, this time is different. You do have a choice, but not the one you think you have. Not the one you probably want. Okay, I changed it enough that slightly doesn't seem overused. Christopher raised his eyebrow quizzically. What do you mean? Draven smiled. You'll find out soon enough. Speak with your uncle next time you see him. You'll have to make your choice. You have 1 week. At that, Draven disappeared, melting into the shadows. Any doubt that Christopher might have had that this man was a vampire left at the sight of Draven melting into nothingness. The weight that Christopher felt lifted when Draven melded into the shadows. Uncle Oliver knew Draven? Did he know he was a vampire? Christopher took off at a run, trying to put as much space between him and the scene that he... Christopher took off at a run, trying to put as much space between him and the scene that had unfolded before him. It didn't take long for him to get home, and despite the cold... that's a bad sentence. Alright, it didn't take long for him to get home. New sentence. Despite the cold, he was covered in sweat. He was out of breath. He didn't stop till he was inside his house. He slammed the door behind him, locked it, and collapsed against it. He sat there against the door for a while, catching his breath before standing back up. He immediately walked to the kitchen, picked up the phone, and called his uncle. He didn't even care that it was past midnight. The phone rang 3 times before his uncle picked up. Hello, Oliver speaking. Uncle Oliver, I saw him again. Draven. They'll think I'm crazy. You probably won't believe me, but he isn't human. I think he's a vampire. Christopher thought that his uncle would call him crazy, that he would laugh, tell him that he was making things up or imagining things, but he didn't, and that's what worried Christopher the most. On the other end of the phone, Oliver spoke. Christopher, don't go anywhere. I'll be right over. We need to talk. Christopher spent the time waiting for his uncle by turning on all the lights of the house. He even made sure to lock every door and every window. He didn't think it would help, but it gave him a sense of safety he was drastically yearning for. He was just walking back downstairs when he heard a knock on the door. Was it his uncle? He didn't expect him to be here so quickly. He walked to the door and checked who it was by looking through the peephole. He saw his uncle standing in a black trench coat. Christopher was relieved and opened the door, letting his uncle in. Hello, Uncle. I'm sorry it's so late. Come in. Oliver walked in. I'm glad you called me. Maybe we should sit down. Christopher nodded. Good idea. They both walked into the living room. Christopher sat down on the couch while Oliver took a seat in the recliner. Oliver said nothing. He patiently waited for Christopher to speak first. It looked like Christopher was about to speak. He looked over at his uncle, his mouth open, but nothing came out, and he closed it again. He's going to think I'm insane. He stood up and started pacing the room. He couldn't sit still. All the while his uncle was just watching him. I think I'm just going to say all the while his uncle just watched him. It's more immediate. Put in 2 different tense. All the while his uncle watched him. Maybe he'll think I'm insane, but Draven was the one to tell me to talk to Oliver. Why was that? I'm going to say my uncle, because he didn't actually say Oliver. Why was that? They did know each other. After a bit of pacing, Christopher finally decided that he would say what he would say and turned to Oliver. Draven is a vampire. He expected his uncle to start laughing, call him crazy, maybe he'd even put him in a mental hospital, but his uncle did nothing and it was unnerving. Christopher spoke a bit unsteadily, filling in the silence. He said I should talk to you? Actually, yeah, I'm going to make that a question. Bam. More motion. His uncle folded his hands together in front of him in contemplation before beginning to speak. Yes, I was expecting this. I talked to Draven tonight. Christopher was a bit shocked. You talked to him? Did you know he was a vampire? Did you know he wants to kill me and turn me into a vampire? Kinda don't want to say vampire again. See how this sounds. Did you know he wants to kill me and turn me into some undead thing? Yeah, that sounds better. His uncle, with his hands still folded, nodded slightly. Yes, I talked to him, and I know his intentions. You knew his intentions? What are we going to do about it? How do we stop a vampire? I don't want to die. Oliver sighed. I'm sorry, but you don't have a choice. You're going to die, and you're going to become a vampire. But you have a choice about who turns you. Christopher didn't understand. Don't have a choice. Has he already given up on me? That's not like him. He didn't say anything and went back down and sat back down on the couch, the hint of a stunned look still on his face. What did he mean a choice of who turns me? There's another vampire? Ooh, I need to... See, I'm worried about the phrasing, turn. Make sure that Oliver said it first, because Christopher obviously wouldn't know that term yet. Yeah, I've been thinking about this for a while, and I want to make sure it's... Yeah, okay, Oliver didn't say it. Alright, I'm fine. What did he mean, a choice of who turns me? There is another vampire? He looked over at his uncle. What do you mean I have a choice? A choice about who turns me? What do you mean? Oliver sat there, a slight look of pity crossed his face. Yes, you'll be able to choose who kills you and turns you into a vampire. A choice? What? A choice? What other vampire? Oliver looked into Christopher's eyes, making sure they connected before simply stating, me. Christopher's mouth dropped open. Uncle Oliver is a vampire? Impossible! I've known him most of my life. He eats food, drinks water, he walks out in the daylight. It can't be. He managed to stammer out, how is this possible? How long have you been a vampire? I've been a vampire for a very long time. I'm going to say for a very long time, because it seems like that's what I'm going to say. So I'll add in the very. I've been a vampire for a very long time, much longer than you've been alive. Vampires are not like in the movies. We can eat, drink food, walk in the daylight, although our power is diminished. I'm going to say we can eat and drink food, although we don't need to. And we can walk in the daylight, although our power is diminished. Okay, let's reread this sentence again. Vampires are not like in the movies. We can eat and drink food, although we don't need to. And, comma there. I'm going to start that sentence over again. Vampires are not like in the movies. We can eat and drink food, although we don't need to. And we can walk in the daylight, although our power is diminished. Yep, that's better. Despite his shock, he was suddenly relieved that vampires might not be what he thought they were. Maybe he wouldn't have to kill if he was forced to become... Maybe he wouldn't have to kill if he were forced to become a vampire. That's the correct sentence structure there. So, you can eat food. Does that mean you don't have to drink blood? Oliver shook his head slightly. I'm afraid that you will still need to drink blood. But you're lucky. You no longer need to kill to survive. You can drink blood from blood banks. Christopher fell back, not feel. Christopher fell back into the couch, the reality of the situation sinking in. His uncle had lied to him his whole life. He looked over at his uncle. Do my parents know what you are? Oliver nodded. Yes, they know. I've known your father since he was a boy. Your mother found out a lot later, after she married your father. Oliver was stunned. They knew? How could they not tell me? My whole life, everyone I trusted, I was living a lie. He was furious. They knew? Why didn't they tell me? Why didn't you tell me? We wanted you to live a full life. Eventually we would have told you. I could only be ageless for so long before you'd begin to notice. Christopher glared over at his uncle and said with some amount of disgust, How thoughtful of you. Now I have to become one of you? He didn't understand why his uncle had already given up on him not becoming a vampire. Why don't we stop Draven from turning me into a vampire? Oliver sat there, searching for the right words. When I talked to Draven, he was set on you becoming his child. I'm gonna say child is a term from a different RPG, but it also makes sense. It's not like it's copyrighted or anything. I don't know if I really want to use it. Progeny. You could say progeny. I want to say progeny. Now I'm going to look at progeny to make sure I'm using the word right. I'm not using the word right. There's a word that sounds like it means student. No. If I'm going with the family motif, progeny works. Because it's like son, child. So, yeah. Alright, so I'm going to go with progeny. Oliver sat there searching for the right words. When I talked to Draven, he was set on you becoming his progeny. It's a long story, but I won't kill him just over you. Too many other people would die because of it. You're important to me, Christopher. I'm going to say, and if we tried to hide you, he would be able to find you. Too many other people would die because of it. If we tried to hide you, it's probably supposed to be a comma, he would eventually be able to find you. You are important to me, Christopher. I care about you, but I won't let other innocent people die for you. I don't think you'd want me to. Christopher was perplexed. How would other people die if I didn't become a vampire? What do you mean? Oliver continued, I could fight him. I might win, I might lose, but in the process, he is sure to kill other mortals like yourself. It's how vampires power... Oh, that's a wickedly bad sentence there. It's how vampires power their abilities. No, it's alright, I just read it wrong. Older vampires can do some very powerful things, but it takes a lot of blood to do it. He could kill others to defeat me. I don't believe I would be able to kill him before he'd resort to that. Oliver's right. I wouldn't want other people to die for me. I wouldn't want others to die for me. But I don't want to die either. So what do? Just give up and I become a vampire? Oliver sighed. There isn't anything I can do. Like I said, I did give you a choice of... It's not I did give you a choice. I need to fix that. I did convince him to let you have a choice of who will sire you. Okay, there we go. Much better. Oliver sighed. There isn't anything I can do. Like I said, I did convince him to let you have a choice of who will sire you. Either Draven or I. Christopher didn't like the alternative. He didn't want to become Oliver's progeny either, especially knowing how he had lied to him his whole life. I want you out of this house. Out of my life. Oh, not. should be no. I want no part in this vampire business. Oliver stood up. I understand this is a lot to take in. I'll leave for now, but you can't ignore this. You must make a choice. What I did was out of love for you. I couldn't stop him, but I was able to make this compromise. He won't wait long for your choice. If you choose me, I will at least let you live for another 10 or 20 years as a human. You'll have to decide soon. At that, Oliver walked out of the living room and out of the house, leaving Christopher with the unenviable task of having to choose. Christopher was upstairs in his room when he heard his parents come home. The next day. He immediately went downstairs to the entryway to confront them. He just turned the corner as he heard them laughing as they were putting down their suitcases. His mother and father, still smiling, saw Christopher walk into the hallway. His father said, "Good morning, how was your weekend?" Christopher did not return to his father's smile. I know that Oliver is a vampire. The smiles on his parents' face turned to shock. They glanced at each other before looking at Oliver. His father... His father said he wasn't supposed to tell you yet. Christopher couldn't hide the anger in his voice. That's it? He wasn't supposed to tell me? That's all you have to say? His mother spoke. He promised to let us know... He promised to let us be there when he told you. It wasn't supposed to be this way. Christopher responded, What? Wasn't supposed to be this way? What way is it supposed to be? His father took a few steps towards... Wow, I missed a lot of words here. His father took a few steps towards... Christopher? Son, it's complicated. Christopher took a step back. Complicated? Try to uncomplicate it for me. His father frowned. I'm not sure where to start. Christopher spoke. Speak from the beginning. His father took a moment to collect his thoughts. I was a boy when I found out. My father always told me fantastical stories about vampires and other beasts of fantasy living in our world. He talked about one vampire in particular who was the guardian of our family, going back countless years. I met Oliver about the same age you did. I was thrilled. It was like the stories were coming alive. As I grew up, I learned more. Our family was chosen by Christopher since the early Crusades. He has been following our bloodline, usually choosing the eldest child to follow the family. Too many uses of the word line. I need to change that. He has been following our family. Usually choosing the eldest child to follow. Still not working out. I'm going to say the bloodline here. Alright, our family was chosen by Christopher since the early Crusades. He has been following our family, usually choosing the eldest child to follow the bloodline. On occasion, like with me being the seventh son, he will choose to follow them as well. He asked that I tried to have 7 sons, much like my father and mother had. He said sometimes the 7th son of the 7th son will turn out to be special, and he wanted to see if that would hold true with you. Not only has Oliver been following our family for thousands of years, he's been looking out for our family. We have a long tradition of working for him. You know, I'm an accountant, specifically an accountant for the organization that he started those 1,000 years ago. He has treated our family well. We owe him. Christopher was furious at his family. You had me because Oliver told you to? This is insane. I can't believe you. You know he wants to kill me and turn me into a vampire, right? His father and mother's faces lit up. Christopher was disgusted. His parents looked happy. Then his father spoke. "That's great! I can't believe I'm going to be alive to witness the birth of a vampire son. You'll make our family so proud. No one has been chosen in our family for countless generations. So proud of you." Christopher couldn't believe what he was hearing. His father wanted him to die and become a vampire. He was aghast. How could his family want this? Want him to die? Christopher wanted to run away, escape his life, but he knew the problem he faced would just follow him. He knew he didn't want to see his parents right now. He didn't even bother to respond to his father. The disgusted look on Christopher's face was evident. He walked past his father and mother and slammed the door as he heard his mother calling out to him. Christopher walked around town for hours, thinking about how his world was turned upside down. He couldn't get over the idea that a vampire, Oliver, had been manipulating his family for hundreds of years. He felt Oliver was calling to collect on some overdue pact that his family made with the devil long before he was born. It reminded him of the fairy tales where the parents would trade their firstborn, that's supposed to be a hyphen, I'm sure, firstborn son for some power, only this time the parents were happy to give him up, happy to see their son thrown into a dark world of blood and death. I'm going to say blood and death. Eventually, he ended up at the door of his friend's apartment. He didn't want to be alone, but he also didn't want to talk to anyone. He didn't want to talk to anyone. Who could he really talk to about this? He knocked on the door, and a blond young man answered. It was Christopher's friend Kurt, who smiled as he saw Christopher standing on the doorstep. "Christopher, hello! I didn't expect to see you today. Last night was a blast. Glad you came with us to the dance. Come in." Christopher stepped inside and followed Kurt to his living room where they both sat down. The television was on and they were both looking at it, but Christopher wasn't really paying attention to the TV. He was lost in his own thoughts, but he was grateful to know someone else was in the room who he could trust, even though he knew if he told Kurt, he would think him mad. Kurt looked over at Christopher, who seemed to be staring into nothing. "Is something wrong? You look a bit sad." Christopher shook his head. No, well, nothing you can help me with. I learned my family has been keeping a big secret, one that has changed the rest of my life, and I don't see how I can change it back. We had a fight and I stormed out. I don't know if I can live with going back. Oop, need a period there. Bam. Kurt got a concerned look on his face. That sounds dreadful. I'm sorry, is there anything I can do to help? I don't think I need to add the "to help." So just do. Would you like to talk about it? Christopher didn't immediately answer. He couldn't tell Kurt the truth. He was sure he wouldn't believe him anyways. Who could believe in vampires? I would like to talk about it, but I can't. I just need company to keep my mind occupied. I don't want to think about it anymore. He thought about what it would be like when he went home. He was dreading it. Worse, he wasn't sure he wanted to go home. There is something you could do. Do you think it could spend the night tonight? I don't want to go home. Kurt nodded. Of course. Of course you could stay. I don't want a comma. So I'm going to ignore that once. You can stay as long as you want. Christopher ended up spending the next few days with Kurt, avoiding his problems. To his credit, Kurt didn't seem to mind. Christopher also didn't go to school. He stayed shut in. He still didn't know what to do. He thought about dropping out of school, moving away, and starting a new life, but he wasn't sure if that would help or not. It wasn't until Thursday that he once again had to face this situation head-on. He was sleeping uncomfortably on the couch when he woke up. He felt strange, like he wasn't alone in the darkness. There was a cold breeze, and he looked over to the window. There was a dark silhouette crouched on the window's edge. Christopher knew before the person spoke who it was. He could feel it. It was Draven. Who else could it have been? Draven spoke. You wouldn't be trying to run away on me now, would you, Christopher? I noticed you haven't been home, and you haven't gone to school. Christopher sat up, reached out to the lamp and turned it on. Reached over to the lamp and turned it on. Any feeling of safety that had developed over the last few days quickly disappeared. I don't want to be a vampire. I don't want to die. Just leave me alone. Draven continued to crouch on the open windowsill ledge. No. Draven continued to crouch on the open window ledge. I see a lot of potential in you, more than I've seen in a human in nearly 2,000 years. I don't want that to go to waste. Draven paused for a few minutes, the first sign of hesitation that Christopher had seen from him. I was not going to give you choice when I made you. My maker saw my potential and saved me from a life of tedium. I was not given a choice when I was made. My maker saw my potential and saved me from a life of tedium. I'm doing the same for you. You will appreciate it one day. There are things I can teach you, show you, things you can't even imagine. It will be a wondrous time. You enjoy fighting. You cannot imagine all the things that I've learned, what I could teach you. For the first time, Christopher saw past the death, the darkness, and thought about what it would actually mean to be immortal, to live through the ages. What could he learn? What could he achieve? Still, was it worth the cost? He knew he would lose everything. Nothing would be the same. He would still have to die. Would he be able to have his friends like Kurt? What about Jennifer? He wanted to ask her out. How could he if he was a vampire? He would never have a family of his own. No, I still don't want to be a vampire. Draven sighed. Maybe you don't, but that is just fear. Fear of the unknown. You still don't have that choice. You know the choice you do have. Will it be me, or will it be Oliver? That is the one you have to make. And you have to make it tomorrow night. You will meet me at Oliver's place at midnight. Your week is up. I hope you didn't waste it. At that, Draven dropped off the windowsill, disappearing back into the darkness. Christopher threw off his blanket and stood up. He walked over to the window and looked up. He was on the 5th story. He looked down, but there was no sign of Draven. Not that he was expecting any. He closed the window and looked back at the couch. He was no longer tired. His impending death weighed heavily on his mind. He decided he needed to get some fresh air. He grabbed his socks and shoes and put them on. He went out the door and took the stairs to the roof. But he hardly paid attention to what he was doing. He was lost in his own thoughts. He didn't know this Draven, and it turns out he didn't know his Uncle Oliver either. Or his parents for that matter. Which is worse, not knowing someone or knowing someone and finding out they were lying to you their whole lives. Not only lying, but manipulating you and your whole family. Not just immediate family, but your whole family for generations. Christopher was having a hard time wrapping his mind around the implications. He opened the door to the roof and walked out. The cold hit him. He was momentarily shocked out of his thoughts. He walked further onto the roof, the freshly fallen snow crumpling under his feet, and took in the view. There was a soft blanket of snow on the group, and snowflakes filled the air. It should be on the roof. There was a soft blanket of snow on the roof, and snowflakes filled the air. Christopher was unsure what time it was. Whatever time it was quiet. That is a separate sentence. Whatever time it was quiet out. I'm going to say it was quiet. Whatever time it was quiet. So quiet, he could almost imagine he could hear the snow softly landing on the ground. Despite the late night, the sky was softly lit by the streetlights which illuminated the falling snow. The world looked like it was in a giant snow globe someone had just shook up. It was a calming scene, but it made him feel all the more alone. His thoughts wandered back to the choice he was being forced to make. He could either choose to be made a vampire by Draven or by Oliver. He hated being forced into a choice he didn't want to make, but he could see no way out of it. He couldn't run. He was sure they would find him. And he couldn't see how he could stop them. He couldn't even land a punch on his uncle when he thought he was human. Who knows what kind of powers he was as a vampire. He felt helpless. He looked down, suddenly realizing he had walked onto the edge of the building. He saw the street 10 stories down. It was white. The freshly fallen snow was untouched. He'd never actually gone up to the roof before. It felt like it was higher up than he expected it would feel. It occurred to him that he might actually have a third choice, one that Oliver and Draven may not have expected him to realize he had. Christopher climbed up to the edge. Ooh. I need to correct something. I'm gonna say he looked down and suddenly realized he had walked near the edge of the building. Christopher climbed up onto the edge, glancing down once again. He could kill himself. He was high enough that his death would be assured. Part of him was ready to do it, to do the one thing he could do to stop them from getting their way. He had lived a life for other people. He always did what was expected of him, what his parents wanted, what his uncle wanted, what his teachers wanted. He rarely got to do what he wanted. He was an adult now. He could make his own choices. He didn't have to live a life he didn't want to live. He could feel himself getting ready to walk off the ledge. His right leg was lifting. In a moment, he would be falling to his death. That would show him. They couldn't have what they couldn't have what they want. I won't. They can't have what they want. I won't let them. His right foot continued to raise. He almost took the step forward, but he found himself stumbling backwards off the ledge. His eyes began to well up. He started to realize what he had almost done. Tears started to fall. He had a choice. He could choose to be a vampire, or he could choose to die. They couldn't take that choice from him. He almost felt a sense of relief, some measure of control over his own life. He knew the choice he had to make. He wasn't ready to die. He would become a vampire. Christopher looked out the window at Oliver's house. It was late evening. It was time to make his choice. After last night, he was quietly resolved to make the choice, although he wasn't sure who he would choose. He looked over to the driver's seat where Kurt sat. This might be the last time I see Kurt. Kurt had been a good friend, although he had only known him for the last few years. Goodbye, Kurt. Thanks for everything. I'm not sure what I would have done without you. Kurt smiled. Of course, anytime. Christopher turned and opened the car door when Kurt spoke. You don't have to go back to your family. We can figure something out. I just don't want you to feel like you have to go back. I'm happy to continue helping you. Christopher glanced back with a small, sad smile on his face. Thank you. I appreciate that, but I've avoided this long enough. I can't avoid it anymore. I need to go back and sort it out. Your support has meant a lot to me. I hope to see you again. Christopher stood up and closed the door, just as Kurt said, Wait, there's a chance I won't see you again? Christopher stood there a moment, his eyes closed. He wanted to turn around and open the door and answer Kurt, but he knew there was no answer he could give. He started walking up to the door of Oliver's house, not looking back. He knocked on the door, and Oliver answered. He heard Kurt's car drive away as he walked into the house, and the door closed behind him. Oliver led Christopher to the living room. During the short walk, Oliver didn't say anything, but he did look back once and gave Oliver a half-hearted smile. As they walked into the room, Christopher saw that Draven was already there. He was standing, don't need to capitalize standing, next to the fireplace, which had a roaring fire. He seemed to be focused on... I think this could be worded better. He was standing next to the fireplace, which had a roaring fire. No, I kind of like it that way. The other way sound weird in my head. I was thinking maybe he was standing next to the roaring fireplace, but that doesn't sound right. I'm going to leave it as it is. He was standing next to the fireplace, which had a roaring fire. He seemed to be focused on the flames. Despite standing next to the fire, Draven was still wearing his trench coat. He looked away from the fire as... saying Draven too many times, so I'm going to say... He looked away from the fire as they walked into the living room. No, actually, Draven should be there to not confuse him for Christopher. Despite standing next to the fire, he was still wearing his trench coat. Okay. He seemed to be focused on the flames. Despite standing next to the fire, he was still wearing his trench coat. Draven looked away from the fire as they walked into the living room. Yeah, that's better. Oliver motioned for Christopher to take a seat on the couch. Draven went back to looking at the fire. Oliver took a seat in the chair next to the couch. The chair was angled so you could get a view of the fireplace while still being able to visit with anyone that would be sitting on the couch. This gave Oliver a good view of both Christopher and Draven. Oliver put his arm on the arms of the chair. Well, this isn't tense or anything. He looked back to Christopher. Thank you for coming. Christopher folded his arms. I wasn't left with much choice. Oliver sighed. No, you weren't, and I'm sorry about that. He looked over at Draven, then back to Christopher. It was unavoidable. Christopher raised an eyebrow. Was it? Tell me this, Oliver. If Draven hadn't shown up, hadn't forced your hand, would you eventually have made me a vampire anyways? I talked to my parents. I know what you've done. What you've been doing. Manipulating my family for untold generations. Hell, you told my parents to have me, to raise me, for you. Oliver took a moment to answer. Oliver took a moment to consider his answer. The contemplation plain on his face. I'm sorry I've lied to you, but I won't lie to you again, I promise. I honestly don't know if I would have forced the issue. I would hope that you would have chosen to become a vampire. I don't know if I would have forced you. I would have at least waited until the time that I thought you came, that you were... that sentence is wrong. Right. I would have at least waited until the time that I thought you... were the right age. This is every chance I may have. There is every chance I may have, but also maybe not. We'll never know. Before Oliver could respond, Draven spoke while continuing to examine the fire. You can't. Not for a long while. I've known Oliver a long time. There are things I trust him to do, and there are areas where I don't expect any honesty. I've come to terms with that. One thing I know is that Oliver tries to do the right thing, which is rare with our kind. He has learned to hedge his bets and have the world work for him. Trusting in fate is not one of his virtues. Draven turned and looked at Christopher. I promise you this. I will never lie to you. I may not always answer your questions the way you like. I might not even answer your questions, but what I do say, you can believe it to be true. You can believe it to be the truth. Christopher instinctually looked over at Oliver questioningly. Ooh, that's a bad sentence. Christopher instinctually looked over at Oliver questioningly. No, maybe that sentence is okay. I just read it wrong. Christopher instinctually looked over at Oliver questioningly, who nodded in response. Yeah, it's okay. It's kind of weird. Draven is uncommonly good for our kind when it comes to keeping his word. I trust he speaks the truth, even when I may not agree with some of his actions. Draven did not turn back to the fire and continued to look at Christopher. Have you made your choice? Christopher was on edge, very anxious. He knew he had to choose. He had come to that realization the other night. I want to say the night before. But now that he was forced with it, he wanted to put it off as long as possible, even if it was only a few minutes. What if I don't choose? Draven didn't skip a beat. Then Oliver and I will figure out a way to decide who will be your sire. Let me be clear. We gave you a choice as a courtesy. If you don't want to make it, then it will be made for you. Now choose. Christopher looked back at Oliver, whose expression was blank, and then he looked back to Draven. He knew it was coming, but it was finally here. He wasn't sure who he was going to pick. Not until this moment. He closed his eyes and spoke. Oliver, I love you, and I always will, but I can't trust you, and I don't know if I ever will again. I can't even fathom the level of dishonesty it takes to do what you've done to me and my family. While I feel this love, I also have come to despise it. It's a feeling I want to stop having. He opened his eyes and looked at Oliver, who had a sad look on his face. Christopher then turned to Draven. I don't know, but you've never lied to me. You even saved my life, even if it was self-serving. I don't know if I can trust you, but you've never broken my trust. I'd rather live the rest of my life not knowing what to expect than live my life dreading that I may be living another lie. I just can't live with that hanging over my head. Draven, I choose you. Oliver's emotionless face changed. He had a sad smile on his face. This must have been hard for you. Christopher's eyes moistened as he looked at Oliver. It was. He paused a moment, trying to hold it together. Will it hurt? Oliver shook his head slightly, still with a sad smile. No, it won't hurt at all. Suddenly, Draven moved. I don't want to comment there. Suddenly, Draven moved. He was no longer standing next to the fireplace. He was now standing over Christopher. He grabbed him and lifted him onto his feet. Looked him in the eye for the briefest of moments before leaning in and biting his neck. Christopher stood there in shock. He expected a sharp pain as he was bit, but there wasn't any. There was a slight increase in pressure when the teeth went in, where he expected it to hurt, but it didn't. I'm going to read that from the beginning again. There was a slight increase in pressure when the teeth went in. I want to say where the teeth went in, where he expected it to hurt, but it didn't. Like a needle when blood is being drawn, the expectation of pain was bigger than the reality. It was an odd sensation. It didn't hurt. He couldn't feel the teeth in his neck. It was sort of a numb feeling, but also had a tingling sensation. It wasn't altogether unpleasant, and if it wasn't for the fact that he knew what was going on, that he was dying, he might actually enjoy what was happening. He could almost feel the blood leaving him. He was feeling weaker. His mind was becoming more muddled. Then suddenly it dawned on him he was dying, and he wasn't even trying to fight back. He was shocked out of his malaise. He struggled, trying to push Draven away, but it was like trying to move a boulder. He started hitting Draven's head, but nothing seemed to faze him. It was like hitting granite that just happened to have hair. He tried to fight back longer, but the futility of it. He had But the futility of it and his draining energy caused him to stop after only a few moments of effort. Then there was nothing. Draven woke up with a start. He was laying on the couch looking up. Both Draven and Oliver were standing over him. They looked different, but he couldn't tell exactly how. Their physical body was muted. The colors they wore were washed out slightly. It was more of a feeling, but he also felt that they were full of life. It was just hidden behind a drab exterior. He also felt their presence again, much like he felt Draven's, much like when he felt Draven's the first time he talked to him. He also felt their presence again, much like when he felt Draven's the first time he talked to him. It was cold, unnerving, but powerful. Oliver was admitted a similar feeling, but it was still more comforting, which scared him a little more. He was confused. The confusion was compounded by his desire to eat. He'd never been so hungry. It was making him hard to focus. There was no pain exactly, but he'd never felt such an overwhelming feeling of hunger. He looked around, trying to find something to eat. He sat up and noticed that Oliver was holding something in his hands. It was an IV bag, but it didn't have a clear liquid in it. He sat up and noticed that Oliver was holding something in his hands. It was an IV bag, but it didn't have a clear liquid in it. He wasn't sure what it was. He wasn't sure what. Well, I just can't read. Hello! Hello, Hansa. Glad you could make it. I'm just editing the story that I'd been working on for the last month or two. And, yeah, finishing my first Twitch writing project, I guess. He wasn't sure what it was He wasn't sure what was in it at first. Okay, I'm just reading this wrong. He wasn't sure what was in it at first. Oh, okay. I want to remove it at first. Superfluous. He wasn't sure what was in it. He hadn't seen anything like it. It seemed to glow, but emitted no light. It was red, and it suddenly dawned on him that it must be blood. He'd never seen blood like this. A sudden wave of hunger struck him, even stronger than what he was already feeling. He snatched, and I spelled that wrong. He snatched the packet of blood from Oliver and quickly brought it to his mouth. He barely felt his insides growing in his mouth. I'm going to say just growing. As he bit into the bottom of the bag and greedily drained it dry. As he sucked out the blood, some of it drained, some of it escaped out of his mouth and down his face. After he finished the bag, he threw it down to the floor. He was disgusted with himself. Sorry. Yeah, alright. He was disgusted with himself. At what he had just done. He felt like throwing up, but his hunger. Two paper straws. Oh man. Those would be some nasty straws after they were done, all soaked with blood. He was disgusted with himself at what he had just done. He felt like throwing up, but his hunger was more manageable. He could think a little more clearly. He looked up at Oliver and Draven with a disgusting look on his face. That was awful. Am I going to have to live an eternity drinking that? I want to say swill. Swill's a fun word. Draven actually chuckled slightly. No, fresh blood is much better. It's intoxicating, No, fresh blood is much better. It's intoxicating. The packaged stuff tastes awful. I tend to avoid it unless necessary. You'll taste fresh blood soon. I would have brought some to feed you, but Oliver didn't want any mortals dying in his house. The hunger was still present, and it kept surfacing in his thoughts. He looked over to Oliver. Do you have any more? I'm still hungry. I'd rather eat more of that than deal with this hunger. Draven answered, the hunger never goes away. It's something you'll have to live with. You'll learn to live with it. You'll get a bite of some real food later tonight. You must be careful. The hunger is a driving force within you. If you aren't careful, it will consume you. You have to be forever vigilant. This is especially true of the young. Nearly all new vampires give in to the hunger. Some never move beyond it. Christopher looked over to Oliver as he spoke. This is one of the reasons why I taught you martial arts. It focuses your mind, gives you some clarity. It will help you fight the darker impulses you have. It was in preparation for you, for the day you might have become a vampire. I wanted to prepare you as much as possible. I wanted to prepare you as much as I could for the change. I have high hopes for you. Trust in what I have taught you and what Draven will teach you. Remember who you are and try to keep the hunger at bay. Christopher stood up and wiped his mouth off and then looked down at the back of his hand. I'm going to break that into 2 sentences, I think. It sounds better. Christopher stood up and wiped off his mouth. Christopher stood up and wiped off his mouth. He looked down at the back of his hand. It was covered in blood. It finally hit him what he was, a vampire. He had just drank a bag of blood. Bag of human blood. He hadn't even thought about it. It was just a natural impulse. Even despite how disgusting it was, No. Even despite how disgusting it was, he wanted more. He licked off the blood on his hand. He could feel it nourishing him, but also made him disgusted. He suddenly got the urge to strike out at Oliver for all he had ever done. He had felt this as immoral, but he couldn't stop himself from reacting. The impulse was too strong, and he tried to attack Oliver. I want to say he did attack. The impulse was too strong, and he attacked Oliver. He tried to punch him. Despite being surprised at his newest found speed, Oliver moved out of the way effortlessly. As much as he was surprised at actually trying to strike Oliver, he was more surprised at the speed that he could move. He stopped and looked down at his hand. This is amazing. Draven looked at Christopher. It is, and we'll have time to explore your new powers, but it's time to go. I'm eager to start your training, and you still need to have a proper meal. Draven then looked to Oliver. We'll be going, but I hope to see you again. Remember what I said, I'll still follow you into another hunt. I may even come when you call me. Oliver nodded, and Christopher looked between Draven and Oliver. You're not going to tell me what this hunt is, are you? Draven shook his head no. It's time to go. He grabbed Christopher's arm and led him out of the room. Oliver watched as the shadows in the room deepened despite the fire and the lights. The exit into the hallway darkened. Okay, no. I was thinking I might have used darken too much, but I didn't use darken at all. I'm just focusing on the shadows a lot, which is fine. Alright. Oliver looked at the shadows in the room. Oliver watched as the shadows in the room deepened despite the fire and the lights. The exit into the hallway darkened as Draven, still holding Christopher's arm, walked into the hallway. The darkness covered them both, and they were gone. Well, there we go. We did it. Dark Choices has been edited. And I've read the whole thing. My next step is to get it published on Amazon, on the Amazon store. Not too difficult. And then I will do a more professional reading of it where I'm not editing it and stuff like that. And I will release the story on Amazon, and if people want to support me, they can buy it. I'll probably have it as $1. And if they just want to listen to the story, I will have a YouTube video up, maybe in 1 or 2 parts, probably 3 parts, honestly. And you can listen to it there if you want to, free of charge. So buying it is just if you want to support me. Thanks, Hansa. Yeah, so that's the next plan. But next week, I'm starting a new story. It will still have these 3 characters, but it's going to be set in the 1990s. And it's kind of a pivotal moment for the novel I'm writing. So it's a background story for the novel I'm writing, much like this one was. It'll have all 3 characters. Oliver will, of course, have a different name because he changed his name every 20-30 years, so he doesn't get caught. And we will start fresh. And the whole thing will be on stream. And I've already, except for the notes, I've outlined some of the scenes and stuff already. So, I'd like to thank you for stopping by, especially Hansa. It was nice to see you again. Oh, okay. I'm now working on a secondary story for my main villain about his backstory. How he settled down and founded a city where a few acts of the main story are situated. Yeah, it's fun doing backstories. I don't know if you've had this problem, but in the past, if I tried to write a backstory for a character, it ended up turning longer and it turned into its own novel. And so I kept having project after project and set in the same world because I kept wanting to do more background, but never got into actually writing the story. Same problem? Yeah, it's rough. I've gotten better at it. I started doing short stories recently, as you're a witness to do kind of backgrounds. But the novel I'm working on was a background. Technically, it was a background of a background, and the other novel I started was also a background. Yeah, leaving the secondary stories are open is important, especially if it's all background material. Like, there's still a bunch of things I don't share. I mean, I share more than I would if I wasn't trying to be a content creator about my process, my background. But there's still a bunch of details that I don't share, so if people read my stories, they will be a little bit more shocked and surprised, so I don't give away all my secrets. Oh no, you've had COVID. That's terrible. That is, I'm sorry. I've heard that it can. I've seen that it can be really bad. I'm lucky I haven't caught it. Ugh, nasty. I like the idea of just kind of leaving the secondary stories open to just free to go back and to explore them and change them. Oh no, your teeth are going bad from it? That's terrible. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I don't know. That's terrible. I can't say anything else. I'm sorry. I wish there was something that I could do. It's a terrible, terrible, terrible disease. Oh, virus. I hope you get better soon. Yeah, it could be worse. Um, Hopefully it doesn't get any worse. See, how long did I end up streaming for? About an hour. So probably I'm gonna head out now, and I really appreciate you stopping by. It was nice to catch up with you. That's true. All roads end in death. I'm glad that you stopped by, and I'm really sorry that you have COVID, but I'm glad you did stop by, and I hope to see you again next week. Be 11 Pacific Standard Time. I started a little bit late this time. Right. Oh, I don't know if you're going to be awake, but tonight at 7 Pacific Standard Time, I'm going to be doing a like a lore thing for Shattered Kingdoms. It's a D&D project, world building thing that I've been working on for like 6 years. So I'm going to be talking about it. I use it for my LARP and stuff like that. So I don't know. It might be interesting for you to hear about stories and stuff. But if you can't make it, that's perfectly fine. Awesome. All right. Well, I hope to see you next week at the very least. Have a good day.